Boulder Being and an event of equivalence. The boulderer reaches out to grasp the rock, and as he touches the rock also touches him. Thus bouldering becomes both an embodied practice and has the potential to generate new meaning. It's clear that bouldering can be considered a performative practice, as having its own taskscape, as embodied, and as having a homeland, its own philosophy, and ultimately a place for a boulder being to be. I see nothing really. I see nothing, and I see only small flashes of rock, and I hear little, only to remind myself to breathe hard. The feeling I have is that I might explode. I reach my next right handhold. It's a sloper, with a small catch for my left thumb under the slope of the hold, and a small irregularity for my fingers to allow purchase and grip. In this presentation, I want to dismantle an understanding of the human subject-object relationship. I want to suggest that a phenomenological approach can mount a challenge to the conventional Cartesian dualistic separation of mind and body. This approach then allows us to look at bouldering as a multi-sensorial, synesthetic and kinesthetic experience, making no distinction between the previously imagined separate realities of mind and body. Then we can have a body that is neither in the mental realm nor the physical realm, but, as Merleau-Ponty would argue, a body in relationship to the boulder that is evolving and dynamic, not fixed and stable. Something along the lines of the climber mid-crux on a boulder problem. The bouldering experience through representation is not therefore to be seen as an expression of what Wiley calls a spectatorial epistemology, but a seeking of representations that move away from a perspectival understanding of subjectivity and subject-object relations, to one where people and environments are seen as continually developing and extending via interactions. Merleau-Ponty describes how the painting by Cézanne of Mont Sainte-Victoire sought to make visible how the world touches us. In relation to this, Merleau-Ponty writes that my body is a thing amongst things. It is caught in the fabric of the world. This quote perfectly illustrates the rejection of a subject-object duality and leads us instead toward the embodied experience that is so important to this present inquiry. Drawing gives us an opportunity to engage with these ideas, as I rejected a conventional representation of the bouldering experience and set myself the problem of drawing the climbing hand and the drawing hand. I reach out my hand, I'm holding a pencil. I want to draw my climbing hands. I imagine reaching out for a hold. This is what I want to draw. So I think about drawing my hand resting on the drawing paper. I put my left hand on the paper and begin to draw it. This is fine, I can do this. Then I think about my right hand. I imagine it holding onto the rock on a small hold. Then I've got a problem though. I want to draw my right hand, which is my drawing hand, resting on the paper. However, I can't. The act of wanting to draw my right hand negates the possibility of drawing the right hand. I ask myself, what's happening here? It seems very odd. I try again, and still, as my hand reached out to the paper, I'm thwarted. Is it my lack of skill as an artist? I can't draw my right climbing hand, nor neither my drawing hand. Should I, or could I, imagine the drawing act and then do it? However, that's not the point. I want to draw my hand perceptually and objectively. There seems a compromise, a negotiation. So the difficulty of drawing the drawing hand is revealed, bringing attention to the paradoxical situation that the hand is both object and subject, highlighting the problem encountered in representing the climbing hand. The problem of drawing the climbing hand becomes evident and illustrates the interface between subject and object. This is apparent when the drawing hand becomes an intermediary between self, the subject, and the object. The frustration of trying to draw the right climbing hand is a manifestation of, or evidence of, my relationship to the world. It literally draws attention to the visible, the drawn, and the invisible in the subjective self. The effect is that in the end it becomes impossible to identify the distinction between the subject and the world. The collapse of the distinction between the visible and the invisible thus becomes apparent in the drawing problem. This phenomenon goes to the heart of my attempts to represent the bouldering experience. The act of reaching out with a drawing hand is akin to reaching out with a climbing hand. The phenomenon is that of the subject reaching out to the object, the hand to paper and the hand to rock. And as Merleau-Ponty suggests, the visible and the invisible become reversible. The act of drawing and the act of bouldering can in this way be considered analogous. They are a creative and expressive act of my corporeal body in the world. In Phenomenology of Perception, Merleau-Ponty describes the experience of touching our own hands. If you reach out with your right hand and touch your left, you can feel your right hand as subject and your left hand as object. But you can also reverse this relationship and perceive your left hand as subject and your right hand as object. As I reach out to draw, the movement, which is exterior, or at least it feels that way, is thwarted and a greater sense of interiority follows. I reach out to draw myself as representation, and instead I'm drawn into the world, the real. The drawings are of myself as I abandon attempts to depict and represent the climbing hand with the drawing hand, and instead draw something that takes place of its own in the world. This idea of a thing taking its place in the world, going beyond conventional forms of representation, is something that will be explored further. I'm calling for bouldering to be art, and art to embrace a bouldering. For what is the difference really when I stand in front of a large sheet of paper tacked onto the wall, and when I stand in front of a boulder? The similarities are numerous, and some I have already described. An essential element of drawing, art and bouldering is that they can and are a way of making sense of the world, a way of engaging with the material world from an embodied perspective. In my pursuit of understanding and meaning, I have been on an intellectual and cultural journey, yet the acts that I'm describing are truly bodily experiences. The mark of a pencil across paper and a move from hold to hold on rock, coming from the body. For me, unlocking a sequence on the new boulder problem is a supremely creative moment. Prior to this moment, it is merely the rock and a human being stood in front of it, a rock without a problem. Once the moves are unlocked, I am in the midst of a creative act, like being mid-drawing. There is uncertainty and excitement, as the process is everything and can last more or less indeterminately. The act may be left undone, uncompleted, and I don't think there's anything wrong with this. Drawings are discarded, left unfinished. Boulder problems are left, discarded, abandoned, handed on to someone else. This doesn't happen with a drawing, I have to add. Bouldering has a shared and social dimension that drawing doesn't. A new boulder problem is offered up to the community of boulderers and the world in a way that invites sharing and participation, in the spirit of the bodily engagement that created it. Drawing is offered as object to be viewed passively and as a spectator. Bouldering can be claimed as offering the potential to engage with the world through the body, generating new possibilities and meanings. The newness is apparent as I reach past the crux of a new problem and climb to the top of a boulder. The intense present that I was occupying a moment ago becomes flooded with sensation as my body relaxes. The small hold that I was pulling so hard on, I felt no pain, and this pain now registers, and smell registers. I become momentarily aware of the world around me again, sharing maybe only in a small way the intensity of emergent meaning and possibility that I have exited from. New meaning is redolent all around me as I step onto the top of the boulder. There is a moment of completeness. Time is now complete, and like a drawing I begin to put it to the side, to maybe show it to the world in some point in the future. Look at what I've done, I say, then realise I only truly did it for myself, to make some sense of my time. The claim I want to make in this video today is that drawing and bouldering are analogous, specifically in terms of touch and reflection. Using Merleau-Ponty's paradigmatic model for all perception, his theory of reversibility, I suggest that this same process was being enacted as my drawing right hand attempted to draw my right climbing hand, as the properties of a clear-cut distinction between the subject and object break down. An example might be such: I reach up and touch the first two handholds. I'm not climbing at this point, I'm just feeling. Friction feels good. I chalk up my hands. I don't want any moisture or grease transferred from my fingers onto the rock. I need all the help I can get, and friction is my friend. The holds are small. The first two are good, relatively good, yet they only accommodate 3 fingers and then only 3/4 of my fingertip pads. Both are different, and familiarity allows me to stress and accentuate different parts of my fingers to get the best out of them. The third hold is high up. I can't reach it from the ground. For this, I have a telescopic pole with a small horsehair brush attached to the end. With this I brush, with attention and care it would seem, the hold. The hold is angled, sloping from the right to the left, and the edge of the hold is sharp and its size is small, taking only the very end of my fingertips. It scares me a little, I know it will hurt, but there are no other holds. An architectural rock draws me into the narrow enclave between the boulders. I see a small line of small holes rising up the boulder. I've looked at this problem many times before. I first had a desire to climb it 7 years ago. 4 years ago I tried to climb it, and it was too hard. The holds were too small and too far apart. The footholds sloped the wrong way. I simply couldn't climb it. This year, after a summer and autumn of training, I find myself back at the problem, staring up at the holes from the flat, sandy forest floor beneath the boulder. The rock is brown and yellow, golden and ochre when the sun shines on it. Today, though, it is glowering and dull. The cloud cover is complete, and no real light emanates from the rock at all. There is, however, maybe the slightest luminescence, but this comes from the damp, saturated lichen and moss that sits undisturbed on the sections of the rock that don't receive the caresses and often anguished touches of the climber. I get steady. It has to be steady, and I reach up and over my head for the angled hold, the small hold. It's so small that if I snatched at it, I'd missed. I do something with my fingers that would look like I was kneading dough or clay with my fingertips, and in a way I'm kneading my skin, my fingertips into and onto the rock. The contact is minimal, yet intimate. If this doesn't feel right, not much else can happen. My left foot now has to do something. I look down to my left over my left shoulder, and I can see the sloping foothold. I've spent minutes peering at this hold, cleaning it, brushing it, wondering how best to utilise it to the best effect. There is a small crease in which I place my foot, and my toe on the crease as I press on it. Everything is in the right place now. My left foot is good, my heel is hooked on the flat hold, and right fingers now have to work the hardest. I engage the fingers and pull as hard as I can. Movement is up and forwards. Forwards first as I pull in with both hands and left foot. Movement then very subtly and without conscious command goes upwards. The left foot initiates this movement. Unconsciously my left hand leaves the first hold and I aim left and high. I can't say what is happening now. I can't say what my body is doing. It just does it. Yet I don't reach the high hold. I'm close, I'm very close. 3 years ago I was 6 inches short. This year barely an inch, if that. During the last decade, my artwork has explored the ways in which I can develop through bouldering an original creative practice, one in which I have established a deep and rich phenomenological account of the bouldering experience, offering new possibilities of understanding and knowledge in terms of how I inhabit and represent landscape both temporally and spatially. In establishing these claims, my practice offers a development of a theory of climbing movement and philosophy, one in which we move from an objective perspective via and through recent phenomenological methodologies and approaches into an era in which we are heading towards a new non-representational theory. I'm seeking to develop a model of performance, whereby the work of art, the performance, becomes an event of equivalence. And it is not to be understood as a representation that stands in for the thing seen, but is there as an equivalence, in this case an equivalence of the bouldering experience. By doing this, I'm outlining the potential for a model that is not reductive, but one which offers the possibility of staging works and projects where significance or meanings are regarded as emergent and inactive rather than fixed. I want to move away from representing the bouldering experience towards being in a new space and creating a new experience, and from this position the bouldering experience can creatively generate meaning and inform and sustain the visual art practices that seek to represent it. In the event of equivalence, experience is brought into conceivability, and new perceptions are registered, and new sensibilities of how human and non-human interfaces of comparable sorts can be assessed and interlaced. I want the audience and the viewer to experience something raw and unmediated, where boundaries between person, place and audience become fluid and blurred as a new moment emerges, which is neither bouldering nor art. This then is a work of art. It establishes a nascent performative, non-representational practice which goes some way towards articulating the experience of bouldering. This event engenders the emergence of a new moment, created in a space that borrows from both bouldering and art. And in the event of equivalence, concepts such as subject and object relations are addressed as a creative engagement, and it's shown that meaning can arise as a result of this discursive, expressive encounter from an embodied perspective. The unknown of the boulder problem becomes the unknown of the moment being created now, here.